Hello, Namaskar, and welcome once again to my show In Our Teens, a show that brings together parents, teenagers, and experts to help us understand the remarkable journey of teenage. Fashion is what you buy, and style is what you do with it. और जब फैशन और स्टाइल मिलते हैं तब ट्रेंड बनता है. आज बात करेंगे करियर्स इन फैशन इंडस्ट्री. In my guest chair today, Mrs. Geeta Castelino, an educationist in art, design, and fashion industry. She has been designing curriculums for fashion universities and institutions for more than 3 decades. आइए आज उनसे बात करते हैं. Hi ma'am and welcome to our show In Our Teens.
Hi.
Thank you for gracing our show and thank you for giving us your time. I know you are extremely busy, but this is very, very important. So thank you for this.
I'm happy to be here.
So ma'am, when I say careers in fashion industry, what is the first thing that comes to your mind?
Fashion design, of course, that is exactly what all the students aspire for. But there are a lot of para-lines to it besides fashion design.
So when you say paralines, what are these different branches that the fashion industry can have?
Yes, like what you wear, from undergarments to what usually casual wear, what you wear every day.
Achha.
Otherwise, bridals, whatever you wear in your daily life. So
whatever
everything
piece
has
of
to be
cloth that you put on yourself, it has a different category to it.
Absolutely.
Like from lingerie to bridal designing.
Absolutely.
To shoes, to bags.
Accessories.
To accessories. Okay.
Styling. Merchandising, basically.
So styling is basically taking different pieces and putting it together.
Right.
So that is a new budding career. Also ma'am, जब मैं आपसे Zoom call पे बात कर रही थी, you spoke about window display.
Yes, visual merchandising.
Visual merchandising.
That's another thing which mostly for girls, especially, because what also happens is that girls tend to, once they get married, and especially in India, when they get married, they do not know what their future is going to be most of the times.
Yes.
And
in terms of career.
Time also comes when I think once they graduate, they start working, and a period comes where once they get married, and then later on maybe they have their children, and there could be a gap in between which they forcibly have to take.
Correct.
And it could be that they can do freelancing through visual merchandising, or they could take a gap and then later on work on it and look after their own house, look after their children, and then again
have a secure job.
Home management as well as
Yes.
your career.
Correct. So ma'am, we were talking about fashion institutes and आप बता रही थी कि costume designing. So costume designing के बारे में जब आप कह रही थी तब.
So costume designing, earlier we used to only think about films. Could be Bollywood, we were also thinking about plays. But right now even advertising agencies
Yes.
require costume designers. There are VJs. When we are talking about VJs, even the styling and that costume designing is very, very important.
Correct.
Another aspect of it is also when we are talking about fashion design, we have different kinds of subjects which come into the syllabus, the curriculum, and that could be, we are talking about tailoring, we are talking about stitching, we are talking about embroidery, we are talking about fashion styling, we are talking about chemistry, that is chemistry of dyes, chemistry of fibers. How do you select a different
Yes.
kind of a fabric for a particular incident, or for say about for weddings, or even if for casuals what you want to do, sports. So different kinds of things, we need to have subjects differently. We also think about history of Indian costumes, history of Indian textiles. We are talking about world costumes, because the students do not just remain in India, but they also go outside.
Correct.
And today global scenarios become so much
It's common.
close
Yeah.
that like you just sit down in one country and you design for something
Yes.
in another country.
Yes.
So all these aspects need to be there. They have to be all-round knowledge for a student, so they can later on decide whether they want to just become a fashion designer or they can take up any one of the paralines to it.
So, ma'am, you're saying fashion designing means not just drawing a particular outfit, but you need to have in-depth knowledge on the history of that material, the art, the culture of that place. So, it's maybe
It's not
thorough
just that
knowledge
with chemistry. I'm talking the way I said just now, that chemistry of fibers or chemistry of dyes. Because most of the times when the designer requires to design for somebody or wants to select something for merchandising, when they are in a firm where they do merchandising, then how do you actually know what the company really requires? So for that you need to do marketing. How do you do marketing unless and until you understand the fiber?
Yes.
Again, the climatic conditions of a particular place where the fabric or the garment is going to go.
Correct.
So, all these things need to be understood, and when that confidence builds up in the student, becomes easier. They have overall knowledge, becomes much better for them to. Nobody can fool them around basically. Even if they say that we are not going to become tailors, or we're not going to do printing or weaving on our own, but unless and until they have all this basic knowledge, it becomes very difficult for them to get people hired, and those people who should not be actually they should not be completely dependent on them.
Yes.
That whatever they say and say yes for it, because there could be times when somebody could fool you.
Yes.
Also.
Yes. So thorough knowledge is
Yes.
very, very important.
Another aspect is also economics, financial conditions, psychological and social part of it, political scenario as well.
So, ma'am, let's talk about the financial aspect of it. Like, if a student or anybody who wants to start a career in fashion designing in their late 30s or late 40s, then what is the right approach towards it? I mean, if a teenager wants to do it, तो जाहिर सी बात है वो एजुकेशन फील्ड में ही है तो आगे अपने चॉइसेस करेंगे. लेकिन अगर एक 30 और 40 year old को भी there is always a switch in career. So, what kind of financial investment do you need in terms of institutions, in terms of study, that one can aspire if one aspires to be a fashion designer?
Also another second career for them.
Yes, yes.
At the age of 30 and 40, and a lot of women are doing it basically today. And I personally feel they don't have to do a degree, 4 years degree course for that. They could do a 2 years course. They could start off with 6 months course and then start off. Then they realize and understand what the whole nitty-gritties are about the fashion industry. Once they get to understand that, then they can start specializing in different kinds of fields, basically paralines.
So, ma'am, when you say this 6 months course or 2 months course, could you just name some of the courses like of study that that can
fashion design is there. Then there is fashion communication, fashion styling. There is, when you talk about fashion design, you learn each and every aspect of fashion into it. So that could be fashion writing if you want to become a fashion journalist.
Correct.
It could be. There are people who also are very good in writing. Their writing skills are so good.
Yes.
And they can. So once you know the right things about fashion industry, so anybody cannot become a critic, but unless and until you have thorough knowledge, it becomes easier for them to write down because their writing skills are good. They can be more impressive. They can criticize a particular design.
Yes.
And they can actually make or break the designer also with that.
Absolutely. So, ma'am, what kind of financial investment are we looking at when we plan to do these 6 months courses or 2-year courses? And are these part-time?
There are courses which are part-time also, and most of the good institutes also have their part-time courses who are running degree courses. It's from 6 months onwards, and you can do thrice a week, you can do every day, and there are quite a few institutes. Pearl Institute is there. NIFT has a lot of part-time courses. NIFT has got more than 13 centers in India. Of course, they have entrance tests. Today, most of even the private institutes, they have their own entrance tests.
Correct.
So once they
Pass
that test, and then they can enroll for it.
So, ma'am, what fee structure are we looking at?
From maybe 3,500 to 10,000 to 2 lakhs.
Okay. It all depends on your choices of
choice of the institute. And also another thing is also, it doesn't mean that because it is expensive it's a very good course.
Correct.
So you need to win. And today with globalization we also have facility for internet searching.
Yes.
So you can have 3 to 4 syllabuses, the curriculums in front of you, see what subjects the institutes are teaching you, and then accordingly you yourself can judge and see what is it, what could be my goal and what could be
My passion.
my interest
Yes,
in it,
yes.
and how I can manage to.
Correct.
Finally, I personally feel that each individual can make their own career.
Correct.
So it's not that just because a good institute is there, you also need to be very sincere. You need to have patience to whatever you are doing, and hard work. Definitely, hard work is a must. Many of the times, you also counsel the parents when the students want to take up fashion as their career, because most of the times the parents do not understand and know what the fashion, because most of the times they see fashion shows, they watch fashion shows and they feel that it's minimum is what, and minimal designing and clothes are there, and how it's going to be, because many of the students also come from orthodox backgrounds.
Yes.
So it becomes very difficult for the parents to convince their parents or their families that the child wants to do something. And it's not that there are thousands of opportunities to do a lot of work in the fashion industry. So there is absolutely no dearth to it.
Ma'am, you're also in the counseling section, So do you come across many parents like that who are still hesitant in?
Yeah, what also happens is that especially from medicine field or from engineering side, or they are advocates, lawyers, these are the parents, and when the child does not want to take up their profession and they want to do something else, many times they're little hesitant because they have always heard something different about the fashion industry. We need to counsel them, and from the point of view to make them understand. Also, when they get admitted into the institute, many of the times we have meetings, PTA meetings.
Correct.
Because it's very, very important for the parents to understand that your child was like, the parents also come over and say that my child was so good in school.
Yes.
That he or she was getting 90% and 80%, which is impossible in the fashion industry or in the fashion institutes to get, because our passing is basically 50%.
Okay.
If you
So
ask
this is reality. This is nothing to get dejected.
Any of the professionals, any of my ex-students, if you ask, they never ever got more than 70% or 7 plus in out of 10.
Correct.
And 5 also was extremely good for them,
Yes.
So it was like, when you fail, you have to repeat the assignment.
Yes.
Basically.
Yes.
Another thing is also that you cannot afford to fall sick, because it's like everyday assessment.
Yes. And you have to
You
submit
don't
your
study something and then after 1 month you go for an exam.
Correct.
Every day what you do, if you, especially now, for example, if I'm talking about a shirt, and if you are going to learn the shirt, like you are going to do sleeves and collars, you do your sleeves, but then the next day, maybe you are not well, so you're not coming, and that time the teachers teach them collars, how to put the collars. So the next day after that, when they come back, you miss out on that. So it becomes so difficult that you need to remain also very healthy. At the same time, every day what you learn, you are marked on it the same evening.
So, ma'am, when we are speaking about institutions now, do brand institutes matter for recruitment in fashion industry? Does having a good degree from an international institute is taken up more seriously? Do we have that kind of a discrimination?
Yes,
Or-
psychologically, I think it is possible and it is there basically. But in the last few years, it's changing, because finally it is up to every individual how he or she can make their own career.
Yes. And, ma'am, is there exploitation in the initial stages of admission, or,
Which industry is there which does not have exploitation?
that is true.
But at the same time, I always advise students that first 2 years after they graduate, get exploited. Get to learn things from whatever exploitation is there, because that is how nobody in the industry is going to pay you for something, even for internship,
Yes.
and say that you make errors. And when you make errors, definitely you're not getting paid to create errors.
Yes.
But at the same time, when you learn things, through your jobs. So keep your eyes and ears open, because that is how, even if somebody says that you make coffee one full month, they ask you to make coffee, or they ask you to just maybe file your papers. But filing papers, what are you filing? See what the papers are like. You can learn so much through those filing papers also. So a lot of things are there, which observation is very, very important. And I think what also happens is, in the institutes, we always say that we make them create, through alphabets, we make them create sentences.
Correct.
But how to make your essays, you
need
once you
to
graduate and once you get into the industry, you actually start making your essays.
Correct.
Which is important, and that is when you actually learn that how you industry actually, what they require, what the industry requires from the institutes. Today when I'm designing curriculums for different institutes and for the universities, I see to it that there is some kind of a bonding between the industry and the educational institutes, because that is what is important. Many of the times industry requires something from
And
the
on-field
graduates. Yeah. So the curriculum should be designed in such a manner where the students, once they get out, they don't need to start learning all over again.
Yes. It should
So
be in lieu with time.
Absolutely.
सो मैम होता है ऐसा कभी कभी कि हमने जो फॉर्मल ट्रेनिंग ली है इंस्टीट्यूट्स में, और जब हम ऑन फील्ड जाते हैं काम करने के लिए, तो दो अलग चीज़ें हो जाती हैं.
Many times.
And does it result in depression, or not giving your optimum output?
There could be more than depression. There could be confusion.
Okay.
And many of the times, what you need to do is maybe unlearn, because you have faultily learned something which you are not supposed to, which is not being taught in the institutes. So when we also admit the students in the institutes, we tell the parents, because parents are so over enthusiastic today that during the vacation times, before the fashion institute starts, and once they get into the institute, they start sending them for different kinds of courses so that they become better.
Yeah.
But why are the institutes there for?
Yes.
They are there to learn from the scratch.
Correct.
So many of the times they also have to unlearn what they've learned, and that is more difficult than when you come raw. It becomes easier for the for the teachers also to teach them from the beginning what is there from scratch. It becomes easier for them to understand, so that when they go to the industry, it becomes much better for them to become designers or merchandiser or doing production or anything which they have taken up as their paralife.
So, ma'am, as a parent of a teenager, if my child opts to be a fashion designer or to do something in the fashion industry, and if I want to train my child, so it's after 12th, after degree, or you can do it anytime in your life that you want?
There are different kinds of aspects to this. After the 10th standard, SSC, ICSC, IP, you can do a diploma.
Okay. And diploma is of duration?
Diploma is usually of between 2 years to 3.5 years. Depends from that particular institute, even if it's a private diploma. I personally also believe that it doesn't matter whether it is a recognized government institute, it's a university degree, or it's a diploma which is from a private institute.
Okay.
Because there are quite good private institutes today in India who teach excellently well.
Okay.
After 10th standard, there could be after 12th standard. What also happens is, after the 10th standard, when the students opt for fashion designing, if it's a 3-year course, they're still too young to go for post-graduation if they want to go outside India.
Yes.
Because then our students are usually hardly 17, 18 by the time they finish their diploma. So they need to do another 2 years before they try
for
to
their
get
masters.
out for their masters outside India. So that is very important, and that's the main reason why we usually prefer students coming after 12th standard.
Correct. 12th or
so that
after
12th
degree.
standard or after degree. After degree, there are also post-graduation courses which you can do where you don't need to do fashion design, like fashion management. It could be fashion communication. You could do after your commerce graduation or science graduation or arts graduation. I personally believe it's always better if a fashion graduate does these postgraduate courses, because they've already learned the nitty-gritties, they know the basics. they know A to Z of from fiber to fabrics to the garment. So it becomes easier for them to actually explore much more and get successful in the industry.
Correct, correct. And ma'am, as a parent, when my child is pursuing this, how much of a financial investment am I looking at for the next 5 to 7 years
That is after graduation.
after graduation?
I also feel
In
that
terms of
this-
fee structure of
Yes.
institutes.
you can become entrepreneur or you can start immediately after you graduate.
Okay,
But if you are working in the industry, you really actually learn the first 2 or 3 years what the nitty-gritties are, what you should not be doing
correct.
to become successful in life. As if once you want to take up as an entrepreneurship.
Correct.
But if you want to still immediately go, there are times also when the family business is also there,
Yes.
where they say that you can immediately join. If that's the case, you will make mistakes and you will learn from your mistakes on the job. At that particular time, I feel then, but between 15 to 20,000 to 5 lakhs.
Okay. Depending on your choices.
what
Yes.
and what is it that you really want to do, what kind of designing you want to do, because if you want to do a bridal, then definitely the prices will
Higher.
go up higher.
Yes.
And whether you want to do custom made designing, whether you are actually only doing something where you are going to be the boss and you are going to have design team with you and the designers will be doing something, which means you have to also pay to the staff.
Yes.
So it entirely depends on how you are going to structure your own
Correct.
unit.
That's exactly my next question, ma'am. For a 23, 24-year-old who is looking forward to launch his or her own label, what is the one piece of advice that you would want to give?
First of all, you need to also think about it when you come into the institute. You also know that most of the students also like coming for fashion because what they have seen outside, what they have seen through social media is that glamour.
Yes.
Once you get inside in the fashion institute, then you realize slowly that the glamour is outside and you are stuck up inside with so much of hard work. There are times when you have sleepless nights. Basically.
Yes. And cutthroat competition.
Absolutely, absolutely.
What you're thinking today is already out tomorrow.
Right. So you need to be sincere with your own self. You need to be patient enough. You need to be actually working and accepting hard work. These are the things, perseverance, patience. These are the things which are the qualities you must have.
Okay. So ma'am, when we are talking about launching your own label, तो इसके पीछे जो अकाउंट्स मैनेजमेंट होता है, स्पेस मैनेजमेंट होता है, डिस्प्ले होता है, क्या इसका भी ट्रेनिंग इंस्टीट्यूट्स देती हैं?
Yes, the last 10 years, a lot of institutes in India have started having subjects as financial management, banking, exports. So they need to understand what are the nitty-gritties while making a label. When you are launching a label, what is it that how do you do your costing?
Correct.
Per garment. And when you are doing the costing, what is it that is required? Not just the material what you have used, but your travel expenses, your own time which you have consumed. So how is it that you need to carry out with all this, and that management has to be taught. And once they learn that, it becomes easier for the industry to it becomes more easier for them, basically, that then they have the full product ready with them into the student, so
Correct. Ma'am, another thing I wanted to ask you was, if someone has already launched a brand, someone has already launched a label, and then there is a loss. Many of them, they're just freshly out of institutes and, they want to set up their own things. And then they realize that it did not turn out what they thought it to be. And then they just ebb. And then how do they come back to it? What would you tell somebody who should come back to their, creative process? Because it's a creative process. And it's an insecure field. कि यहाँ पे कोई ऐसी गारंटी नहीं है कि महीना खत्म होगा तो एक सेट अमाउंट आपके बैंक में होगी. So what would you want to tell to these creatives who've probably given up because of high costing, and but having loads of creativity and passion?
It is not always just because of high costing, but at the same time, many of the times the graduates also feel that they are very good with design. What happens is that when they actually come into the industry, they learn that in the market when you have to satisfy your client. Satisfy your client, like how I said before, that you have to understand that individual also.
Correct.
Psychologically, there are social aspects of it. And then accordingly design for that particular client.
Correct.
So many of the times a failure also happens because they've not actually learned or they've not followed what they have learned.
Correct.
So they could relearn, they could also do small courses, they could maybe do 2 week sessions or 2 month sessions where they get to understand that how they can actually relaunch their label and do which they were missing out on something.
Correct.
So self-analyzing also is very, very important.
It's like unlearning and relearning.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. Ma'am, another thing we are talking about this fashion is global now. It is reaching every nook and corner of every country. Also, there are many other countries who are interested in our Indian viewers. So it's just not Indian fashion is going out in terms of our skills, which lie in the villages, in the rural areas. So sometimes being in this fashion industry, do you feel that sometimes the viewers get exploited and they don't get the due recognition that they're looking out for?
It is not just
Contributing
globally.
so heavily towards fashion.
When we are talking about globally, not just outside India, but Indian designers to exploit the karigars to much extent. That needs to be cut down and maybe give credit to the designers. Many of the designers today have been doing it. That have been, when they have their own fashion shows, also they invite these karigars and give credit to them. And Indian heritage is so large and it's so rich that even outside India, actually, a lot of labels have been coming to India and getting work done, especially embroidery and printing work, weaving. So these are the kinds of things I think we should be able to think more about by designers who are graduating now. They should have some humanitarian grounds where making money, everybody has to make money. But then in that process, even those who are actually doing so much of hard work, they should also get something out of it.
Okay. And ma'am, do you think कि Indian fashion both Western influence की वजह से it is good amalgamating both cultures, or you think Western culture is overpowering Indian culture?
See, the thing is, in India, we started fashion pretty late. But at the same time, what also happens in USA, in Italy, in most of the European countries, they start forecasting. Forecast is a very, very important part, and that also is a part in the institutes, fashion institutes. We teach them how the forecasting is done, basically.
Forecasting is
Fashion
changing
forecast.
of trends?
Yeah, changing of trends. So what also happens is that they start 3 years before. They start researching how the fashion is going to be in 3 years' time. Whereas in India, we have so many religions, we have so many of festivals, we have so many with different seasons also. Different states have their own cultures. So what also happens in India, that designers do not follow what the global market actually requires, especially for local governments. So then at that time, they actually follow their festivals.
Achha.
And that is perfectly okay. I feel that if you are going to be having your labels and you are going to do your production only for Indian market, then that's completely okay. But if you want to do something for exports, then you need to follow the forecasting what these international agencies are doing.
Which is market focus. What's
Absolutely.
the demand is going to be.
Right.
So you need everything in fashion industry. Yeah? You need mathematics, you need economics, you need business management, you need all the
Geography,
subjects.
politics,
Yes.
social aspect of it, psychology, everything.
Yeah. So it's not just about making someone look amazing. It's about, having a complete thought process behind it.
Absolutely.
Nice. So ma'am, one last question, which is not a serious one. What would be the difference from our regular tailor, जो गली में blouse सिलाता है, to a fashion designer? What, apart from, obviously, I mean, he's also had training. He equally has had the same training of craft as an institute would give. Now, why is there so much of a difference in terms of everything?
Finishing. Finishing is the main thing. What also happens is we teach different kinds of finishes, even when it comes to embroidery. How the embroidery is being done. When we are talking about embroidery also, what you see on the roadside and what you see in a fashion designer's boutique, why is the pricing so vast?
Yes.
The difference in pricing is basically if you see any garment, and if you just uh, ulta karke, basically you see the inside of the fabric or inside of the garment. That's what we usually do in the fashion industry, and even for fashion institutes. When we teach the students, we need to make them understand what the quality is all about, different kinds of finishes which they do for fashion designers. They have to be properly trained. The trailers need to be properly trained. So, and that is the main difference between an ordinary tailor and a master G, which actually stitches for a garment house or for a fashion house.
So the true craft lies in Andarska stitching.
Absolutely.
That's the mark of a designer.
Finishing, because once you start wearing properly finished garments, then you do not want to go back and say, then you start to think about it, that your confidence level becomes much better when you are going around places, and especially in corporate world today, when the officers and the management level, when they wear such kinds of clothes, they know that their confidence level definitely goes up,
Yes.
2 notches higher.
Yes, definitely. I mean, it's the first impression. Clothes
Absolutely.
is the first
Yes.
impression. Ma'am, before ending, one more last thing. What I wanted to ask you is for teenagers, especially sustainable fashion and repeating clothes. What are your thoughts on this? I know we are in fashion, we are creating a new garment every single day, we are introducing new texture in terms of cloth every single day, but still, what should be their approach in terms of sustainable fashion and repeating clothes?
Sustainable fashion today, I think in the last 5 to 10 years in India, we have improved so much, and it is right now, I think, every fashion show, if you see graduating fashion show in the institute, there is always a collection on sustainable fashion,
Yes.
and which is very very important, repeating or making things out of maybe whatever saris your mothers or your grandmoms have worn the saris, and how you can make use of those saris again
Correct.
and give a new look to it.
Yes.
Sustainability is in for sure, and it's going to remain throughout.
Yes.
Another thing I would also like to talk about is inclusive fashion.
Yes.
In most of the fashion institutes, I have been designing curriculums, and last 3 years I've been in the universities. The vice chancellors have given me the leeway to actually change their syllabus to inclusive fashion. It's from temporary accidents to permanent accidents. So disabilities. So for the disabilities also, we've started to design in the curriculum. There is a subject where the students have to learn about 21 different officially known disabilities and how they can design clothes for them, from mentally challenged to physically challenged people.
And I think fashion has been a pioneer in inclusion of genders,
Absolutely.
and this is the next
Exactly.
step. So I'm sure we are there.
And the institutes are working, and students have been doing such wonderful work. And last 3 years, I've been part of this, where we've had contests, national level contests, where the students have actually come out with brilliant ideas, and their mentors have been these physically challenged people who actually are going to wear their clothes.
Yes.
So what their difficulties are, they've been explained. They are mentoring the students, and the students understand what the difficulties are to wear the clothes, and why should they be wearing different kinds of clothes. Why not what a model wears, or what you and me are wearing?
Yes,
Why not
yes.
they also wear something so that they can go for social gatherings? Because many of the times these are the people who cannot also go outside for parties, or they cannot attend certain social gatherings, only because their clothes, they do
Yes.
not know what kind of
Yes.
clothes to wear, and they don't look smart.
Yeah. What an amazing thought, ma'am, to have it in the curriculum and give it its due credit.
Absolutely.
It's so important. Inclusion is the way of
Yeah.
future. Ma'am, such a pleasure to have you on our show, and this is a small token of love from me and
Thank
my
you.
team.
Thank you.
And just bless us and bless all the teenagers to have some amazing careers and they make their mark in the world.
Yes, thank you. And you are doing a great job of actually giving away about information about different kinds of careers, and this is something I think everybody today needs, especially the parents.
Yes, parents, yes, because there's so many careers available today that it's difficult to make a choice, and a little guidance from the experts can help them make their choices better.
Absolutely.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you once again
Thank you
for
very much.
coming on our show.
Thank you.
आज के लिए इतना ही, पर अगले एपिसोड में मिलेंगे आपसे. तब तक टेक केयर एंड यस, डू नॉट फॉरगेट टू लाइक, शेयर एंड सब्सक्राइब. नमस्कार.